26,000 students entering into ninth grade in this district at year. Below, we have the district's 5 outcomes. And what we see is, again, similar story, a lot of similarities. We're looking at an 83% high school graduation rate for students in District 5. A lot of similarities to the district story here, but it starts to drop off. We start to go deeper into the college experience, right? We're seeing for the district 63% college enrollment rate versus 54 for students in District 5. 72% college persistence rate, that's how many students stay enrolled in college after their first year. 63 for District 5, and then 47% completion rate and 32 for District 5. Again, this is not a reflection of students' interests, right, or abilities. We fully believe, we know there's a lot of history, particularly on the west side, of disinvestment and opportunities that have not been provided for a lot of our school communities here. We think that's a really important thing, this context that we work through as we talk to the data, and that's going to be important context for this board members. One last thing, I just want to close with a little bit of a deeper dive and look at who makes up these about 3,000 students that are entering into high school in District 5 every year. So what we look at, it's going to be hard, but we can see just from a population, a couple things pop out. So again, this is incoming classes of ninth graders. We've seen a decline in the number of students, CPS students, that have lived in District 5 over the last about 15 years. This is still a predominantly Black district. About 67% of ninth graders entering into CPS in District 5 are Black students. And we're seeing a slightly growing population of Latino students, where it was about 18%, and now we're at about 28%. When it comes to the top 5 enrolling high schools for students that live in District 5, this is something we feel is really important. We're trying to get in front of communities and candidates. So we see these are the top 5 schools that are enrolling students in District 5: Westinghouse, Prosser, Noble Street Bulls, Steinmetz, and Michelle Clark. It's a little tricky to see, but each of these dots represents one of those schools. And something that pops out is that not all of these schools are within District 5, right? And I think this reflects a larger trend in Chicago public schools. Right now, we are in a district where 75% of our ninth graders no longer attend their assigned neighborhood school, right? A lot of them still attending neighborhood schools, but they're not attending their assigned neighborhood school. And so I think when we look at this other category, we see 78% of students that live in District 5 are attending a high school other than these top 5, which is something I think really important for us to consider when we're choosing, again, candidates, and we're working with our board member who gets elected, is that regardless of how we feel about this right now, we have students going all over this city, right? And so we are looking for systems thinkers, right? Because the decisions that are made in District 5 are going to be affecting the students all over this city, and will be affecting our students that are in the community and the ones that are leaving the community to go to school in CPS. So trying to really, and I think it does open up some really important questions too around what are some of our goals around making sure that we have strong neighborhood and local options for our students, right? To break that down a little bit further, to share a little bit more of that data, again, when we look at the patterns of enrollment by school type, this is looking at for all ninth graders in CPS, we have 20% enrolled in a neighborhood high school that's just not their assigned neighborhood high school, right? Again, 24% are enrolling in their assigned neighborhood high school. We have 24% are enrolling in charter schools, 15% are enrolling in select enrollment schools, and 15% are enrolling in citywide options. That includes our military schools, our option schools, and a handful of specialty schools, right? When we compare that with enrollment in District 5, we see some differing trends. 17% are enrolling in other neighborhood schools. We have about 8% currently enrolling in our assigned neighborhood high schools. 37% enrolling in charters, 13% enrolling in select enrollments, and 23% enrolling in citywide options. So again, this is really important context that we just want to set out before we jump into these conversations. Those are a lot of numbers. I know some folks' eyeballs are spinning because we looked at a bunch of graphs in 10 minutes, but that's part of it. What I wanted to share just to close is, again, this data is public. This data is built for communities. This data is built for candidates also and board members to make sure that we all have access to common information. This is only one part of the story, but we do think it's a really important part of the story. So 2 and 2 Project, this is our work. This is how we like to partner with communities. This is how we like to partner with leaders around the city. We have our contact information up here. If you have data questions that you want help accessing any of these resources, please feel free to reach out to us. And again, all of those graphs that I showed you are publicly available on our 2 and Through Milestones tool. You can Google 2 and Through and take a look at this for yourself. You can look at these outcomes by high school, for every high school in the city, every elementary school in the city. We can look at this data by community areas, the 77 community areas of Chicago, where students live, regardless of whether they're in high school. We recently just launched a version of the tool that allows you to look at CPS student outcomes by each of the city colleges campuses. And again, we launched a version of this tool that allows you to look at CPS student outcomes by your elected school board district. So, thank you all. Our last piece I want to share too is that, again, this is one form of data. We also do interviews with CPS alumni. So there's an opportunity to look and hear directly from our students. We do believe are the best experts on what it's like to navigate this system, to help us understand what has worked for them, what were some of the barriers they were facing, what are some of their pushes for us as a support community around how we can do better. So we always try to encourage folks to make sure we're using both. That is data also. It would be incredibly helpful as we figure out how we want to move forward. Thank you all for the time. Thank you all candidates for being here, and looking forward to getting to the rest of the conversation. I'm sure I'll pass it. I'm bringing Mr. Winters back on.
Yeah. Where's he at?
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions quickly? Well, I'll be around if anybody else.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you. So much good information. We don't often have an opportunity to have our scholars be able to break down that information for us so that we know beyond the salacious news stories that we see, but what are the facts? What's the data? How does this all work? And that's what these forums are really to do. Not just to introduce us to the candidates, but so we can actually unpack all of the stuff that's behind it. So I hope that the 2 presentations that we heard a moment ago will give you put some thoughts on your mind and give you some questions to think about so you can go back and study a little bit more so that after tonight you have even more questions and you can dig a little deeper and we can be curious about not only our candidates but also the process. And so now I'd like to bring up our moderator for this evening. Our moderator tonight, if you give me a moment, I'm going to change my glasses. We know how that is, right? So our moderator tonight is Ms. Ramel Terry. Ramel is a distinguished, thank you, House Lights. She is an advocate, a community leader, and a technological visionary. Ramel is a distinguished community leader and an advocate based on Chicago's West Side with an impressive professional background spanning over 15 years in technical leadership, case management, advocacy, people leadership, program development, community organizing, and her unwavering commitment to advancing the Black community and empowering its youth is at the top of her list of priorities. Ramel has consistently partnered with grassroots organizations to confront legislative and enforcement inequities economic development, education, legal system reform, healthcare, affordable housing, and so much more. Okay. As the former vice chair for the Make-A-Wish Foundation's Targeted Community Engagement Council and an advisory council member for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, also known as COPA, Ramel has demonstrated her dedication to community service. She also has contributed her expertise to the Good Governance Transition Committee during Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration, highlighting her commitment to good governance. There's so much more I can tell you about Ramel Terry, but I'm gonna wrap it up by saying that her education far excels even her experience. She has a Bachelor of Science in Aviation Administration, a minor in business, and she has over a decade of membership in the Chicago West Side branch of the NAACP. Currently, she is, beyond her professional endeavors, she finds joy in traveling, not only locally but abroad, but most of all, giving of herself, her time and her talent and her treasure right here on Chicago's West Side. I am pleased to introduce Ms. Ramel Terry, our moderator for this evening's candidate forum.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, candidates. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all to the audience for being here as well. As was stated, my name is Ramel Terry, and I currently serve as the first vice president and political action chair for the Chicago West Side NAACP. Before we get started, I'm going to take an opportunity to go over some of the forum rules with you all. I do ask that you respect the rules that will be outlined. I also want to highlight for anyone who has questions, you have about 3 minutes. Can the runners, those who are collecting the questions, wave their hands? So if you have any questions that need to get to the moderator, please make sure to let them know so that they can bring them forth. So as we deal with the forum rules, the rules are: be respectful to the moderators, to the attendees, and to one another. There may be some technical glitches, which we've seen, so we will do our best to address them properly and fairly. You will have 2 minutes for your opening statement, 1 minute and 30 seconds for each question, and 45 seconds for your closing statement. I do want to acknowledge our gentlemen, young men in the front who are doing the timekeeping, Mr. Allen and Mr. Jones, if you can wave so that they can see you. So the way that we will address the time, once you see the red, it's waving the red flag, so we need you to stop, okay? And so we really want you to respect the time, and the goal of this is for you to give concise and specific responses. Also, while there may be connections between issues, we do ask that you please do your best to stay on the topic of the question that's specifically asked. Also, please address all responses to the moderator, not to anyone in the audience, and not to either of the candidates. Do we have any questions? Yes. Any questions? Are we all good? Okay, so prior to this, just like everything else, we did a randomization around the seating as well as the question order. So the first question, which isn't a question per se, but the opening statement, we're going to start with you, Jousef, and then we're going to come back around to you, Kernetha, and then we'll end with you, Jitu. Okay, Jitu. And we'll end with you, and then I'll let you know who starts off the next question, and we're just going to continue to go left in that order. Good? All right. Let's get started. You have the 2 minutes ready to go. Jousef, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that NAACP West Side, for having me.
We have mics.
Usually I'm super loud, but it's nice that I'm not this loud. It's good. Hello, everybody. My name is Jousef Shkoukani, spelled a little differently. My mom, coming from an Italian Greek background, born and raised in Michigan. She wanted Jousef with a PH. My dad wanted Jousef with a Y, immigrating here from the Middle East. And so before they divorced, they were compromising at the time, and they came up with Jousef. So a little unique, but I'm excited to be here. I met my wife in Chicago in 2021. We both practice law here in the city. I've always wanted to be in a vibrant metropolitan area. I'm really glad to call Chicago, and specifically the west side of my home. It's the place where my wife and I hope to raise our kids. And it is, something special to us. And education specifically for me is special. See, growing up in the first grade, I was held back. Education policy, I guess you could say, really affected me early on. And so I think that really sparked something in me to really want to engage with it. In law school, I wrote about education inequality in America and talked about the disproportionate impact it has on metropolitan areas. In Detroit, there was seniors who were graduating and who were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. And so that really got me interested in diving deeper into it. Read The Color of Law and other, books talking about, the different societal laws and construction to create racism and inequality across, our nation. And so one thing that I want to do is combat that and really build on the quality of our education system across Chicago and the U.S. hopefully. And I would really appreciate any support and your time. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Kernetha.
Greetings, my name is Minister Kernetha Jones, and I'm saying the minister because I'm very concerned about how our children are being groomed. I've lived in the city of Chicago basically all my life, west side, okay? I have a master's in special ed. I've taught in charter, contract, CPS, private, homeschool. Children are my business. I live in the hood. I look out in my community. I hear what he's saying. The young man gave me stats. My stats are saying my black boys are not working. We got people can't even speak English all in the streets. They're working, but my boys are not working. I'm going watching the fire trucks, the ambulance trucks, everybody in there are not my black boys. I got a problem with this system that has failed my people. And I'm here now to say, you want to trans them, you want to mutilate their body, cut off their stuff, do all this, but you're not giving them an education. You've taken away phonics, cursive, 14,000 black teachers fired. I have a problem with that. So I'm standing here right now to say I want real live justice. I'm in the streets. I thank God for them stats, but my stats is showing that my black sons have totally been kicked to the curb, and my daughters, but my sons, because we know that if you can kill off the male seed, you got the rest. So I'm here now to help to get a school system. You know, we have to go to the root of the problem. I don't want to know about how many groups and organizations you've been up in. I don't want to hear that right now. Let's go to the root. How are you going to take away cursive, phonics, hire all the black teachers, give them porn in preschool on up, calling it the Comprehensive Sex Act, grooming our children? I have a problem with that, and I'm here to unite with whoever I can, and my foundation is going to be passed.
Time. Thank you. Mr. Jitu.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. All right. My name is Jitu Brown. I want to say thank you to the Westside NAACP and all the partners for putting on this important forum. I'm excited that after the years of struggle, that we actually have the right to elect our school board. And I think at some point tonight, we need to talk about how we got an elected school board. It was not a gift, it was struggle. It was struggle. And I was a part of that struggle. And I like us to kind of walk out of here on the same page with that. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, proud West Side resident and alumni of Chicago Public Schools. I'm husband to a wonderful wife and father to a brilliant CPS student. I'm a community organizer and a coalition builder. I've been an organizer for over 30 years. I've worked with communities to win education equity in Chicago and around the country. I've dried the tears of mothers in school closing hearings. I've been arrested for the right to have an elected representative school board. I've watched people who were billionaires make decisions that their children would not be impacted by, and watched my neighborhoods decimated by it. But I've also organized and won. We've organized against privileged interests and showed them what power really was. I've been elected to serve on local school councils at the elementary and high school level. I became an LSC facilitator in 1999. I've trained LSC members on the west side and across the city. I led the effort to develop an innovative, equitable school improvement model called Sustainable Community Schools, which emerged out of a community-led fight for Diet High School. I coordinated youth leadership programs in Douglas, Al Rady, Nash, and John Smith. I coached the beloved Windy City Dolphins football team for 10 years. And I co-founded the organization Communities Organized for Democracy and Education, where we developed a referendum that said 88% of Chicago wanted an elected representative.
Time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next question, we're going to start with you, Kernetha, and then we're going to go to the left and back around. So the first question reads, and remember you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Timer keeper is right in front of you. The first question reads, how do you view the board's role? How do you view the board's role?
Well, I thank God for the young lady who came prior. She said engaging the.
Kernetha.
Oh, thank you. And my glasses. She said engaging community and knowing their values and beliefs. And she also said guarantee all students read and hold management responsible. And then third, how are students doing? That's where I'm at. We have to, number one, engage the communities, because I'm seeing a lot of policies going forth that has absolutely nothing to do with the community. And I'm trying to figure out who put these policies in place if we're supposed to be engaging the communities, okay? And guarantee all students read. 92% of our Black students can't do math, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're gifted and talented. The system has failed. 82% can't read. Are you kidding me? My cat can read. And for this to be happening like this, the system has failed them, and that's why we're here. That's how I figure out what's going on. And how are the students doing? Our students are completely being destroyed in this system. And I'm speaking with a passion because I love my students so much. I love all students. But for me to see what they're doing for my Black sons and my sons, out of all the students you test, the Black boys score higher than any other group. We put them in this school system. We have the biggest prison system in the world. You have to combine 10 countries to get the prison system.
Yes, it's you, Jitu.
Yes, ma'am. Can you repeat the question?
How do you view the board's role?
Yes, ma'am. The board for any organization is responsible for policy, setting policy, is responsible for advocacy, for what the board's mission is, what the district's mission is, and in many cases also responsible for finding resources. So I serve on the board of Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, Midwest Academy, Equal Education out of Johannesburg, South Africa. And the role of the board doesn't change. The size of the job may change. But I think it's important that this board advocates for what we feel like our children need. That means advocate at the federal level, advocate at the state level, advocate at the municipal level for resources. It sets policy and direction. Like, what is Chicago Public Schools' definition of education? I would challenge anybody to tell me that. So how can you have a district that's on a mission if there is no defined definition of what education is? In the Journey for Justice Alliance, the organization that I work for, we say that education is inspiration and information that prepare young people to impact the world. And whether you agree with that definition or not, it shapes everything that we do. And so I think that this board is going to have to be different because we're moving away from the scam called school choice, and we're moving towards real education equity. So we have to have a different definition and a different way forward. Thank you.
So how do I view the board's role? I think Ms. said it best earlier, not management, but governance. Governance, thank you. So what does that mean? Setting priorities, the direction and goals of CPS, approving the budget and, how we go about doing capital improvements, making sure our schools are sustainable and up to code, approving policies, whether it's contract for principals, teachers, also governance, in the sense of making sure we're talking with our legislatures, talking about, making sure we can get them to fund our pensions like every other statewide school program across Illinois, making sure that Chicago public schools can also have their teacher pensions also funded by the state of Illinois, setting the calendar, snow days, got you. No, I'm just kidding. Hiring and evaluating the CEO, making sure that Pedro Martinez is doing his job accordingly, or whoever the next CEO is in line, listening to the public and the community. I think that's like number one. And, I think to, Ms. Jones, what she was saying earlier, I think it's important that not only are we just asking, the community what they're looking for, but even if we don't get surveys or results, we're going door to door to some extent, or to, to make sure that we have a full encompassing, respective view of how the community feels, and making sure we're putting forth policies and programs to, match that, and then ensuring equity. I love that we're switching from school funding for schools in need instead of student heads. I think when you fund for student heads, I can talk more about that later, but yes, that was my.
Thank you. So the next question, we're going to start with you, Ms. Jitu. I really want to get it correct. Thank you. So this next question is really just a yes or no question. So yes or no, and then we'll move to the left. And it reads, would you support the expansion of middle schools in the community to better prepare students for rigorous high school curriculum?
Yes.
Thank you. To the left.
Yeah, yes as well.
Yes, also.
Thank you. The next question, we're back to you, Mr. Jousef. And the question reads, how will you work to engage Black parents and community leaders in decision-making processes and ensure their voices are heard in shaping school policies?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, I'm the only candidate on the stage, who's not Black. I will be the first to, say that. But at the same time, I understand what it's like to be, from a minority community. I'm Palestinian American. My dad immigrated here from the West Bank. I've lost 20 family members in Gaza, family members I've never even gotten to meet because of the apartheid system that has been set up to make sure that the people in the West Bank can never meet the people in Gaza. And so I know what it's like to have representatives in your state or in your county that, maybe you don't feel like they fully represent who you are as a person. And like I said, I think for me, and I mentioned it in my last one, I want to make sure that the community that I'm serving is fully heard. So whether that's going and talking to parents door to door, whether that's having surveys, that's always applicable, having office hours for sure, but any way that I can engage, I want to. I'm the type of person who will go to ends lengths to make sure I do a great job. And at the end of the day, whatever is best for the CPS students is what I'm about, and that's what I want to do in this role. And obviously, again, I'm not Black, but I care a lot about education, especially in minority communities. That's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I'm here to do.
To you, Ms. Kernetha. How will you work to engage Black parents and community leaders in decision-making processes and ensure their voices are heard in shaping school policies?
Well, basically what worked with me, since I do have a master's in special ed, children are my business, and I've taught as a substitute teacher for approximately 5 years in contract charter, CPS, whatever, the southern suburbs, I've been there. Also, I go to church in the community, and I live in the community, and I am the community. So I'm always engaging with people, because most of the people out here know I'm at a lot of their meetings. And I'm engaging with the children also. Now, when I went around to get signatures, over 2,300, I was engaging with the parents. I mean, I'm so much fentanyl reefer out there. And I'm saying that because they were fanned up out there when I was out there, but I was getting signatures, breathing in that smoke as I was out there. And the parents were out there telling me what they wanted, and they were just like me. They would say, we're not for this, we're against this completely. And I'm trying to figure out, if you all are against it, I'm against it, the community against it, the church is against it, the organizations in our community, who pushed this stuff through? Who is doing this? So how do I do it? I'm out there. I live in the community. I go to church. I've been singing in the choir all my life. Want me to sing? Come on. So that's how I'm doing it, because I am the community. I am a part, and I made a decision not to move out of the community. I can move today, but I'm not going to move.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, sister, please repeat it.
Yes. How will you work to engage Black parents and community leaders in decision-making processes and ensure their voices are heard in shaping school policies?
I think that's an excellent question, because that's what drove us to fight for an elected school board in the first place. That the people that were on the board, to them, we were peasants. Our voices didn't matter. So as a community organizer, one of the things that you have to be fiercely committed to is listening. You have to be fiercely committed to humility and understanding, regardless how many letters I have after my name, I'm not better than that mother who loves her baby. And so you have to listen. And so when I formed the Mid-South Education Association in the Bronzeville community, I became an LSC trainer to recruit local school council members that wanted to fight for education justice. When we developed a plan for Diet High School, I talked to over 2,000 people in Bronzeville and built a plan that the American Education Research Association said was the best plan they'd ever seen for diet assistance feeder schools. And what they now learned is that people will fight for what they helped to build. And the fact that we have a lot of schools that are quote unquote underutilized on the west side of Chicago is actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Black children to finally have small class sizes, like they had at Ogden International. It's an opportunity for us to have medical clinics in our schools. It's an opportunity for us to determine how the institutions function in our community and stop the colonization that happens in our neighborhoods. When people run institutions in your neighborhood and they run it and you don't control it,
Time.
you have colonialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with you, Ms. Kernetha. And the question reads, what have you heard from community members as it relates to setting priorities for CPS? More specifically, what have they identified as the top 3 priorities?
Number one, the parents do not want their children to be taught the comprehensive sex act. They do not want their children to be transgender and groomed in preschool. Excuse me. I got your.
Forum rules,
Amen.
speak to the moderator.
Amen. So basically, they do not want that. When I was out there getting over 2,300 signatures, when I was sharing it with the parents, they were saying, what? They have a rule where they do not have to tell the parents anything, and they can do this. The parents want quality education. The parents want Black teachers hired in the school that represents their children. If the school is 40% Black, we shouldn't have 12% Black teachers, if that much. They want teachers that represent them. They want a quality curriculum. Why did you take phonics out of school? Any nut knows that's the foundation. Our children need phonics. They need cursive. How are you going to take cursive away? Now they can't even sign checks. We are going to find out who's pushing these policies, because we were told at the beginning you're engaging the community to see what is their values and beliefs. The parents said, we didn't vote for this. Who put this in our school system? Who annihilated and destroyed our school system? Who sabotaged our school system?
Thank you. Mr. Jitu? What have you heard from community members as it relates to setting priorities for CPS? More specifically, what have they identified as the top 3 priorities?
Yeah, I can definitely tell you that some of the things that I've heard in talking to people has been the desire for more Black teachers. Since the year 2000, the teaching force in Chicago public schools was 44% Black, today it's 19. I've heard a lot of folks that want to see culturally relevant and responsive curriculum. They want young people to learn about themselves, develop a sense of identity. And I've heard a lot of complaint about the lack of art and music. If you go to the schools that Rahm Emanuel sent his children to, art and music were core curricular subjects. Well, in our schools, as people like Paul Vallis and Arnie Duncan wreaked havoc in our schools, the curriculum got narrowed. So a lot of the art, music, civics, and things that I remember, our children didn't have the opportunity to get. So those are some of the things I've heard. I've also heard a call for civics. I've heard focus on science and technology, the trades, and to actually include the trades, look at the trades as STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and music, and make it a part of the student's curriculum, because as we know, every child does not want to or need to go to college. So there needs to be a career pathway, right? And we know that has been neglected to us for years. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Jousef?
So I learned the most about my community just from District 5 in general, from getting signatures. I live on Jackson and Racine, so I live next to Skinner West, and it doesn't, I recognize that District 5 is large, and that I live in a part of District 5 that may be very different than other areas of District 5. I made it a priority to go around to the entire district when getting signatures, so I fully understand, the different needs, wants, and asks of the community. My biggest thing is I want to make sure I always do that. And so the three things that I heard was equitable access to quality education, quality funding, making sure that the schools and the students within those schools have what they need to succeed, whether that's making sure that the building doesn't have leaks and it's not leaking on their children, making sure that they have access to a librarian or books or technology. Right now, we're moving into such a fast, artificial intelligence movement in terms of technology. And it's not to say that we have to make leaps and jumps within our education, but I do think there's a lot that we have to do to stay up to par and up to speed if we want to be the world-class education system that Chicago Public Schools promises and has as their mission statement. And lastly, I think, from what I've heard, parents' right to choose the best outcome in school for their child. Parents know best. I'm for neighborhood schools. I'm for building those up as community hubs. But at the same time, I think parents should make that decision. And as we invest more in neighborhood schools, people will choose charter schools less naturally.
Thank you. So the next question, we're starting with you, Mr. Jousef, and it is a yes or no question. And the question reads, will you commit to implementing monthly communication with constituents to provide updates and receive feedback?
Most definitely. And I will be receptive to all feedback, I can assure you.
Thank you. Ms. Kernetha?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jitu?
Yes.
Thank you. So this next question, we're going to start with you, Mr. Jitu. And the question reads, within the board's oversight, how will you ensure CPS is equitably providing a high-quality, world-class education to Black students in Chicago?
So it's really interesting that a lot of municipalities are now starting the departments of equity. You see it all over the place. But I think equity cannot be determined by the seats of privilege. Equity has to be determined by those that are closest to the pain. Those that are closest to the pain must be closest to the power. So if we have so we're forming an organization called the Alliance for Westside Education. And the whole purpose of it is for parents, young people, community residents, educators to reimagine education on the West Side. For not to we can't listen to somebody tell us, well, they're not gonna let us have that, or lower our expectations based off what the ceiling normally is. I'm believing that the difficult we do right away, the impossible just takes a little longer. And when I look in the eyes of my young people, I look at them through the eyes of somebody who's trying to be free. So I'm not gonna look at my young people through the lens or the limitations that the system puts on our young people. Our young people are as beautiful, precious as anybody else's, and they deserve we owe it to them, a world-class education within safe walking distance of their homes. So it will be regular engagement with people in the 5th district. It will be hyper-democratic. It will be hyper-democratic because it's not about me leading anybody anywhere. I will just be a true vessel for the dreams that we have in our community. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Jousef?
Repeat the question.
Yes. Within the board's oversight, how will you ensure CPS is equitably providing a high-quality, world-class education to Black students in Chicago?
So a couple different ways. One, the funding metric, making sure neighborhood schools have what they need. So when I say a community hub, like I did earlier, I want to make sure our schools in those areas have access to quality healthcare, access to mental health, access to schools that, have sustainable infrastructure and safe infrastructure. Earlier I was mentioning also, hiring, having more Black teachers, actually having policies and programs that put our narratives, whether you're from a Black history or Middle Eastern history or a Hispanic history, making sure that the protagonists in our histories are shown and in our teaching at schools, making sure our programs and policies are not just what has been prescribed to us for decades and leads to inequality or the feeling that our students are less than or incapable of being the greatest, as Muhammad Ali would say, who I resonate with and really have as my role model. So I think there's a lot of different ways, but whether it's teaching, whether it's the funding, or it's making sure that our parents and our students have access to quality education and healthcare, because sometimes decisions, it's not always on the student, sometimes it's just the household, and households play a big role on one's ability to have a quality education and succeed in their education curriculum. So making sure that we are looking at those other obstacles in the way and providing different means through programs and
Time. Thank you.
Okay, and please repeat the question.
Yes. Within the board's oversight, how will you ensure CPS is equitably providing a high-quality, world-class education to Black students in Chicago?
I think what we said, I keep going back to the foundation, engaging the community and find out what is their values and beliefs. Also, you must make sure your foundation, the preschool, has sufficient foundational curriculum. There is no reason why we have 83% children who can't read. This is sheer madness. All you need is a fanatic approach. All you need is teachers who look like them that they can relate to. It's not that hard. And then also, school choice. Now I'm going to say that. Hey, listen, nobody forces me to go to a salon on the corner of my house, period. And I can't go anyplace else. I go get my hair done where they can put the extensions in correctly. You know what I'm saying? So if we're going to force children, no, you're going to have to stay right here in this rat hole of a school system until we get it right. No. While we're building it up to be as great as it should be, if a child and a parent wants to go to another school, let the child go to another school and let the money follow the child. Why would we hold them in a school system if the parent wants them to go to another school system? So that's how I see we would do it, is make sure that we have the foundation, curriculum right, the correct teachers in the school system, and then parental input, the church's input, and take this comprehensive core out of the school system.
Thank you. The next question that we have, we're starting with you, Ms. Kernetha. And the question reads, how do you plan to track and report progress on equity initiatives, and what metrics will you use to measure success?
I think that the testing that they have so far, the test that they give the students every year is pretty good. But now, when I went to school, the tests were only used to see how well they were learning, because there was gross inequity, when I was going also, they said, okay, listen, we're not gonna hold these children back in college, in high school. We're gonna let them go head on through. Because the system had failed. So what we would do is see how well the students are doing, not to hold the students back. We're failing the students when the school system is a failure. We're holding the children back when the school system is a failure. What we need to do is guarantee a quality education and see how well that curriculum is working. If the children are failing, it's not the children are failing, the system has failed. So what we would do is, yes, we could use the test, but we're gonna use it to see how well the school system is doing. And we can fail them, not our children. We have special ed programs. We put the children in special ed programs. These 92%, these are not special ed children. These are gifted children who are coming from one of the worst school systems in America. We're gonna have to turn that around now.
Thank you. Mr. Jitu?
Yes, ma'am. I served on the Black Student Success Committee that worked for over 2 years to develop a vision for how to best serve Black students. I think it's important to hold whoever the next, if it's Pedro Martinez or somebody else, whoever the CEO is, hold them accountable to monthly reports on what's happening with that plan, and then also just really insist that that plan is implemented quickly. Some things that are in that plan is developing a pipeline of Black teachers, is committed to culturally relevant and responsive curriculum. Things such as training for local school councils by community organizations and Chicago public schools. So there were some really good things in there that I think that's one way we can hold the system accountable. I think the other piece is really just engaging communities in the process of, again, dreaming what you want your school system to look like. Think about this: a world-class pre-K through 12th grade system of education within safe walking distance of everybody's home. Just so, what does that look like? And I think the 6 pillars of community schools is not, because I've heard some of the stuff out there about it, which is completely misinformed. The sustainable community schools model strictly means community-controlled schools. That's all it means. It was developed out of a community-led fight for Dying High School. That was led by Black parents. So I think that's a good model to utilize.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Jousef?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. How do you plan to track and report progress on equity initiatives, and what metrics will you use to measure success?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important is as we grow our school board going from 7 to 21, I think it might make sense to have each board member have some sort of committee or sort of role that they are going to tackle that's important across CPS. So for example, transportation was a big issue this past year, making sure all of our CPS students can get to school safely and on time. And so having one of the board members specifically be responsible for tackling that initiative and having or building a committee around them to do so versus an entire board that would go after one thing or go after another, but it's not as designated or focused. And I think by building out these and identifying these different areas of needs, like equity, for example, we can make sure that we have somebody there who we can hold accountable to some extent, have measures where they can build out measures of what they're looking for and who they report to at each school. And whether it's with the local school councils or the principals, making sure that we're engaging to understand the different metrics of each school. I completely agree in investing in community schools. I just want to say to Mr. Jones, I think all CPS students are gifted, whether they're in the special education curriculum or not. I'm a local school council member at Wilma Rudolph Learning Center here in District 5. It is a special education school, and our students are brilliant. I think that there's a lot that we just don't know about special education, and I really hope that CPS can build on that. As a board member, I think that would be an initiative or group or focus area that I would really want to target is that special education.
Time. Thank you. So our next question, we're going to start with you, Mr. Jitu. And the question reads, what specific outcomes do you expect to achieve within your term regarding improving academic performance and closing opportunity gaps, especially for Black students?
ask that question one more time, Sister?
Yes. What specific outcomes do you expect to achieve within your term regarding improving academic performance and closing opportunity gaps, especially for Black students?
So I offered the definition of inspiration and information that prepare young people to impact the world. It's sort of how I see education. So I think one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that all children have equitable access to inspiration, right? And so I think when you have that, and when communities are engaged in the process of building the institution that serves them, then there's some excitement around it. And so one of the first indicators that a school is improving is increased attendance. It's one of the first indicators. I was interim school coordinator at South Shore High School for 5 years, and that was the first indicator when people were excited about coming to school. Then I think we have to also look at how we assess. Because I'm a believer in portfolio assessments. I do not think our children need to be tested 6 and 7 times a year. If W.B. Du Bois understood in 1940 that standardized testing was a tool for eugenics, it's inexcusable that we still depend on that today as a measure of our children's intelligence. So I think portfolio assessments, project-based learning, and things like that are good indicators. And young people's enthusiasm, their ability to solve problems, their ability to adapt in different environments, these are all multiple indicators of intelligence and proficiency. So I think that for me, the first year will be about assessing the state of CPS, assessing the state of the 5th district, and then after that, beginning to build vision with the people in those communities.
Thank you. Mr. Jousef?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. So the question reads, what specific outcomes do you expect to achieve within your term regarding improving academic performance and closing opportunity gaps, especially for Black students?
Well, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is keeping the parents, not the school board, in the driver's seat as to which education they want for their student. And I think that's important when it comes to closing the gaps and making sure that we're hitting on what we need to, because there's a sort of objectivity and a sort of accountability there. By choosing your neighborhood schools, you're choosing those schools for your students. And as we build our neighborhood schools, I think it then becomes onto the parents to then make a decision. Okay, I trust our neighborhood schools, and I do want to send our students to those neighborhood schools. The other thing, and I mentioned the equitable school funding, but also when it comes to standardized testing, I was horrible at testing. I told you I repeated the 1st grade. One of the things that I want to make sure is that we have more metrics that we're looking at when it comes to whether we're making a decision as to who can be in a magnet school or a selective enrollment school, or when it comes to just how a school or teachers are performing, making sure that we're not just looking at testing numbers, but really trying to dig deeper and understand the competency and understanding of a student's grasp on a certain subject matter. And that way we can build off that and make sure we can provide what that student needs to succeed in the years to come. That way when they get to college, when we were talking about college readiness and career readiness, earlier on, I think it goes towards making sure that we're not, letting something slide by for so many years and not making sure that we're targeting it so we can have that student build on that. And that way when they enter college, they're ready, they're prepared, and they make it through.
Time.
Not just 2.
Thank you. Ms. Kernetha?
The outcomes that I plan to see in my term is phonics being placed back in the school. Apparently, we don't know how important that is. I have grandchildren who can read at 2 years old because I put a phonics DVD in front of them and they got the foundation. You didn't even have to teach them the rest of A before E and all that stuff. You didn't have to teach them that. It comes automatic once the foundation is there. Put the foundation back in. Put the Black teachers back in the school. Put Black history back in the school system. Give the children recess. I've been at charter schools, CPS, even private schools. They keep these Black boys, listen, these are Hebrews. They need to go out in recess and enjoy themselves. In Oak Park, they got 3 recess periods. They don't give our sons and daughters any kind of recess period. Even in prison, they give them a break, okay? They can go out. We need Black history, mandatory recess. they also need career training, because when I was in school, I was in office occupation. They trained you in like junior high, and then you worked in that career while you're in school. And listen, we have all kind of programs in my community for firefighters. Let those firefighters who teach the kids how to throw a ball, let them begin to train with them so that we can train them.
Time.
Amen.
Thank you. So the next questions I'm going to ask are questions from the audience. And the question will start with, this next question will start with you, Mr. Jousef. And the question reads, currently, there is not a solid relationship between the board and the state legislature. How will you build the relationship needed to get your priorities done?
I think that's an excellent question. Earlier we were talking about making sure that we have funding for our teachers' pensions, making sure that we have funding to rebuild and have capital improvements on our schools. This stuff does take money, and if we don't want to close down schools, which I think all of us on here are very much against, and if we want to continue to build up our neighborhood schools while making sure that we have, sustainable funds for our students in whatever schools that they're currently in, be that neighborhood schools, charter schools, selective enrollment, magnet schools, then we're going to need the funding necessary to do all of this. And so while I'm for making sure that we are looking at who we're bringing on as contractors for capital improvements, doing a forensic accounting, making sure that contractors are bidding on jobs and we're not just grandfathering in people to do the work, to make sure that we're actually getting a bang for our buck like we would with our own dime, with our own budget, making sure that we're looking at the CPS dollars, the billions of dollars, and making sure that we're spending that in the same way that we would spend towards our own, towards our own personal budget. And when it comes to our legislatures, making sure that we can have a relationship that goes beyond, just funding for this and that. Build something long lasting, so whether it's the legislatures need a place to, to come to the city and making sure that we are, show them the different improvements that we make, show them the difference that CPS students can have on the total outcome of whether it's Illinois GDP or just the overall aggregate of Illinois success, showing them how important it is that we invest. That way they have skin in the game too. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kernetha?
You know what I'm gonna say?
You want to ask the question?
Yes.
Okay. So currently, there's not a solid relationship between the board and the state legislature. How will you build the relationship needed to get your priorities done?
Well, basically, I'm a community activist. I would go to the community, I would go to the churches and inform them as to what's going on, the same way I did when I got over 2,000 signatures. And I'm still going to the churches to tell them we don't have to unite against pornography out of the school system. So basically what I'm doing is I am going to the community, exposing, showing them what's going on. They can do their own research, but I'm going to bring it to them, and then united, we will go and get the job done. And then there's something that's said in Africa, how are you working for me and you don't involve me? And then they over there in Africa, that's why I'm wearing these clothes, the money goes to Africa. But they'll burn the place down. How are you coming over here working for me and I'm not involved in it? So we want the community, the churches to get involved, and I am a minister, so I'm going there, and I'm with the West Side Ministry Coalition and other. I'm going to get the churches and the community involved.
Thank you. You have a question?
I'm good. Yes, ma'am. I think the first thing is that I have relationships with many members of the state legislature already, including my wonderful sister, Senator Keisha Collins. But as an organizer, I've worked on campaigns that created things like Grow Your Own Teachers, the Community Youth Employment Act that we passed at the state level, which would raise $14 million for youth summer jobs after the federal government had disinvested in summer jobs. And then I have relationships with community-based organizations around the state, as well as faith-based organizations around the state. I'm good friends with Pastor Robert Jones, who is the Illinois coordinator for the Illinois Baptist Ministers Association, also a candidate for school board in District 10. and was one of the diet hunger strikers along with myself. So I have a lot of developed organizing campaigns. I've spoken power to power before with my people, and we won. Because there's gonna have to be major funding reform at the state level. I just want to say this before you say stop, let me get this last 20 seconds out. If I understand it correctly, for decades, Illinois was 49th in public education. And then we had a district committed to privatization. So we need to be careful with that term, school choice. School choice has meant the closing of over 160 schools in Black communities around the city of Chicago. That means something to me. And I think the next piece.
Time. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So the next question, we're starting with you, Ms. Kernetha. And the question is coming from the audience, and it reads, during the state hearings, IAAFER advocated for the Black Student Achievement Committee as part of the state law and to keep the signature requirement at 250 rather than the 1,000 signatures supported by the CTU. Why did any of you participate in the advocacy or the hearings? Notices were posted in advance.
Well, personally, I'm not familiar with what that person is talking about. So if you all want to share with me later, and then that would help me better to understand what you're talking about.
So
I can give you a bit of context. So during the legislation of this elected school board, and when they were coming up sort of with the criteria, there were, I don't know all what the acronym stands for, but it's a group for Black people that was focused on ensuring that people actually had access, that it was truly a democratic process, because there was a significant concern about the number of signatures in comparison to like certain, elected officials don't even have to have 1,000 signatures, and something like the school board should have had something more reasonable, like 250 signatures. And so the question is, this group posted about, the hearings and notices, and is trying to find out why weren't any of you all involved in supporting that initiative, because they were very concerned about how impactful and community-centered this particular election would be.
Basically, I guess one reason why I was one of the ones who was, they questioned my signatures, and they questioned all of them. So they had me tied up in a room someplace trying to count and figure out what they were talking about. So I was fighting that with saying this is not fair, but this is the first time they had an elected school board like this. So a lot of things they were doing is like, we had our hands kind of tied up. We were against it, completely, because they said it seemed like it was happening disproportionately to Black people, and I was one of them. So we were totally against it, but we'll continue fighting that process because we know we're dealing with gross injustice, period. So that's why we're here today, to turn it around.
Thank you. Mr. Jitu?
Yeah, I guess my response would be that I didn't even know I was going to run for the school board, so it really wasn't an issue for me in the beginning. My decision to run for the school board was around the commitment to protect sustainable community schools and having somebody that can be trusted in back rooms. So, yeah, I was never really contacted about being a part of it, so I don't know that much about the effort, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Mr. Jousef?
Thank you for that question. To be honest, I did not know that there was a committee involved before the elections actually came about, and who were deciding this sort of decision maker. I moved into Chicago in 2021 and met my wife here. This is where we're building our roots, and I hope in the future that I could be a part of these important conversations, because I was one of the people who had their ballot challenged. And I will say, the same 4 attorneys that went after my ballot, the same 4 that went after Mrs. Jones' ballot, and Mrs. Jones and I maybe haven't been on the same page when it comes to some of the issues here on the stage, but when it comes to the ballot challenging process and the signatures, I do think there was a great injustice that was done. The person who challenged my ballot was recently appointed this past week onto the school board after the 7 members resigned.
In addition to that, the 4 attorneys that went after me, 2 of which represented Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and many other DNC folks. I mean, we're talking about really hard-hitting attorneys, really expensive attorneys. And so to hire them across all districts, all 10 districts, and those same 4 attorneys only represented 2 candidates. Which 2 candidates? The only 2 CTU endorsed candidates who had their ballots challenged. Jitu Brown didn't have too much to say on this topic because his ballot wasn't challenged, to my understanding. I knew several, like Anthony Hargrove, who's here today, who had his ballot challenged twice. Won one, lost one, and was ultimately kicked off. And now District 5 only has 1 option on the ballot. And when we talk about democracy, it's important to remember that it goes towards your choice, the options you have to elect. And you will only have 1 person on the ballot unless you know how to spell my name.
Thank you.
He's a qualified. Right.
You want to respond to your ballot not being challenged? So feel free. Was it challenged, yes or no? That's the basis of the question.
No, my ballot was not challenged. I have a base of people, People United for Action and the 290 IPO that backed me from the beginning. Coached the Winter City Dolphins. I had coaches that went out there. I had an organization that went out, and that's why I got over 3,000 petition signatures. So I think I want to hear, and in this room of Black people, primarily, who live in Black communities, it's really strange to me that nobody's talking about the Illinois Network of Charter Schools. Nobody's talking about Paul Vallis.
Can we wrap up? The question was
Yes,
dealing
ma'am.
with whether your petition was challenged.
Yes, ma'am. I just think that there needs to be some, like, political clarity. If you're raising issues, raise issues with the people that closed over 160 schools in Black neighborhoods in Chicago. Teachers union ain't closing their school. So we gotta be clear, man. That's it.
Thank you. So the next question that we have, we're going to start with you, Mr. Jousef, and the question reads, what are your ideas to address the consistent $300 to $500 million budget gap in the school district, and how will you engage external partners for funding?
Great question. I think it has to be on a legislative end, it has to be on a local, whether it's connecting with businesses across Chicago who do business in Chicago, making sure that they are engaged and an actual partner with our CPS schools in those areas, making sure that they are coming back to our schools and there's boots on the ground. There's one thing to just give money, and there's another thing to actually be engaged with the students, actually being a mentor. One of the things that I started was Unified Under Hope. It's a nonprofit education. We started in 2020. We provide supplemental tutoring, mentoring resources, back to school drives. And one of the things that we really try to do is pair our students up with mentors who they can see themselves in the coming years. So making sure that whether it's in a high school level and they're part of the honor society, or making sure that it's somebody who's in the community that can help them give them job advice. If somebody wants to be an architect, making sure that we pair them with somebody who's of like-minded. So having those business and nonprofit partners. The other part of it is going and having sure we have grant underwriters, both federally and state, making sure we're applying for all of the relevant grants that would apply to all of our CPS schools. That way we're not missing out on potential funding opportunities for our schools, and that way we don't have to go back to our city constituents and say, hey, we need to raise taxes because now we don't have enough money, when there was a bunch of money that was on the open and accessible, but we just missed that opportunity. And last but not least, making sure that we have a good relationship with our legislators. Jitu Brown mentioned earlier that he can be a trusted person in backroom decisions. You don't have to trust me in backroom decisions, because I want to make all of my decisions in front of you, and making sure you see what's going on.
Thank you. Ms. Kernetha?
I think that what he said is excellent also, and also we need to monitor. A lot of times we want to throw money at the situation, but we need to monitor where that money is going. They had big, huge warehouses with computers, supplies that were purchased by the CPS. The children never saw that equipment. They were telling us as staff, you can go in there and take it. I saw schools throwing dumpsters full of material and furniture and books in the garbage. Any business that purchases all of these millions of dollars worth of supplies, and our children can't read, and they're not using it on our children, and it's in the warehouse, it's a bigger problem than just we need more money thrown. And that's the supplies that they're not using. We're not talking about the theft that's going on. So we need greater monitors over the money that we have right now, and let's figure out what's going on. We need to find out why we're not using millions of dollars worth of supply that's in warehouse. Why are you all throwing dumpsters of material away and our children can't read? I got a problem with that. I'm not saying throw more money at us, and then what? I mean, we want the scores to go up. Money ain't gonna do it. When we do have the money, we need people over to monitor it, like he said, or like Jitu is going to say. But most of all, we're getting funded. A lot of the funding is being wasted.
Thank you. Mr. Jitu?
Please, sister, ask your question one more time.
Yes. So what are your ideas to address the consistent $300 to $500 million budget gap in the school district? And how will you engage external partners for funding?
So there are several issues that are connected to that. So first, I think, just think about this, that I mentioned a little earlier, that Illinois was 49th in education funding for decades. Now we're like 37. That's nowhere near enough. If you look at states that are more equitable, usually states provide about anywhere between 50 and 70% of the school district's funding. Illinois provides 25%. So I think that there has to be a definite move to make Illinois the funding, the education state. They have to get right to do with Chicago families, with Illinois families. But I also think that we have to reform TIPS. TIPS has been a hustle for corporate interests since they've been in existence. They can port TIPS from low-income communities. That's how they built the Wintrust Arena. They ported TIPS from the low end, let me just say it like that. They ported TIPS from the low end to help build the DePaul Arena, and it's supposed to go towards addressing life. So I think a larger percentage of TIPS every year have to go to education, not just the TIPS surplus, a major percentage of those TIPS. And then I think we have to reform pensions, because the pension crisis is not because teachers are greedy. The pension crisis is because the Daley administration in Vatican did a 10-year pension holiday where they didn't pay into people's pensions. I'm the son of a steel worker, so I'm careful before I think about anti-union type of messages, because what it's meant for the Black community.
So this next question and last question of the evening will be a yes or no question. We're going to start with you, Ms. Kernetha, and the question reads, should local school councils have the authority to approve the placement of school resource officers?
Should the local school council?
Yes. You need more context related to the questions? So in schools within CPS, they previously had what were known as school resource officers, which were officers that were designated to the schools. Under the previous, under Mayor Lightfoot's administration, the board at the time made a decision that decision would lie with the schools. Upon the new current administration under Mayor Johnson, the board made a decision to unilaterally remove school resource officers from all schools, meaning previously schools had the choice whether or not they had school resource officers. Currently, the board made a decision to remove them from all schools, whether the schools decided they wanted to have them or not. So the question is asking, should local school councils have the authority to approve school resource officers?
Let's be clear, they're police officers. It was the last board that actually made that decision.
Well, yeah, I mean, technically, because we have a newly appointed board. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm really, I know you all, some of you all scared of some of the children, I'm not. I really don't like the officers in the school in the first place.
So is that a no? It's a yes or no question?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Jitu?
Should local school councils have the authority to put police officers in schools?
The school resource officers is what they refer to them as. To my knowledge, they're not dressed in plain clothes.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say no as well, though I do think it should always be on a school by school basis, but I'm against police officers in schools, so I'm gonna say no to this question.
Thank you. So, give our candidates a round of applause. This is the last of our questions. And so we're going to give each candidate a 45-second closing. We're going to start with you, Mr. Jitu.
Thank you all for the opportunity to present tonight. I've been a servant in my community consistently for the last 30 years. Malcolm X said, I'm not a particularly educated man, nor am I an expert in any field, but I'm sincere, and my sincerity is my credential. I've been on post. I do not desire to trinket. I'm not doing this to be an insider. I'm not doing this to aspire to some higher political position. I'm good. I'm doing this because I want to look in the eyes of Black children and say that we're doing right by it. So I pray that I earn your vote on November 5th. Thank you all very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Jousef?
Thank you again for the time and thank you for this opportunity to be here. I want to take a proactive approach towards the education system that I hope to build and raise my kids in. I want our neighborhood schools to be the types of schools that I'm proud to send our kids to. My wife and I, who's here today, I may not be on the ballot, but Jousef with a J, Jousef, last name Shkoukani. If you can't get, I might not be Black. I might not have been born in Chicago, but I deeply care about the education system in America, and specifically in my backyard here in Chicago. Anything that, if you disagree with anything that I said here on stage, I will be receptive. I will answer. My website is jousef4cps.org. I would love to have a conversation because I'm open and receptive to making sure that we do what is necessary for the best quality education for our kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. King?
Basically, number one, I like to say, I'm also against the COVID injection with our children unless they further test it out. Quit injecting our kids with those aborted babies, because that's what it is. Okay, number two, what I plan to do, whether I win or not, I've been passing this out for the past 3 to 5 years. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop fighting for my children. Comprehensive sex porn is CPS, child pornography system. It's got to go. So I'm going to fight for our children. I'm going to work with him wherever I can. If I don't get in, it's not going to stop until Jesus comes back, because I'm a minister first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Please remember about the upcoming election. Please vote. Early voting is happening now, and I'll bring Mr. Winters up to say any final remarks.
Okay, you all, again, before all you all leave, I wanted to bring up our chapter president so he can give you all words of closing. And also, again, thank you all for coming out. I'd like to thank the candidates as well. And also our moderator, thank you very much.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you for coming out. I'm the chapter president for Zion Member Chapter. We have something we call national programs. This is one of those national programs that we're supporting, which is for service and advocacy in our community related to voting. It's called Voteless People and Hopeless People. I'll just say this. The program was started in the early 1930s with the intent to combat obstacles to voting that we had in our community. Our ancestors went through this. So I'm going to encourage everyone to be actively engaged in this election, to play an active part in selecting your destiny. Again, if you don't control your destiny, someone else will. So we want to make sure that you're enabled to know everything you need to know and be active in this election. So again, I want to thank all the partners and everyone for coming out, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you.
Really quickly, if anyone is looking to be engaged in the work of the Chicago Westside NAACP, our second vice president is waving hands. Please reach out to her. We would love to have you all involved in all the great work we're doing here on the West Side. And I do want to thank Principal Sharp for allowing us to utilize this facility, as well as Mr. Demarion Span, who is a young man who he's still waving his hands, he's still here. He's a leader here at Collins, a leader in the city, and he helped to organize this event as well.
And finally, I'd like to say on behalf of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, they don't make a chapter, the co-host with Alpha Phi Alpha, we thank you for joining us. Visit us at akaramafoundation.org to learn more about our programming on this side as well as across the city of Chicago. We hope to see you all again at a community event near you. Thank you.